Hello students, welcome to our concluding lecture for visual semiotics for visual communication. Over the course of this entire span of different lectures, we looked into different aspects of visual communication in relation to visual semiotics. We looked at how human communication takes place. We looked at how after this communication intents are fulfilled, if there is an image that is used, how do we perceive that? How do we perceive image in various forms? Then we looked at some of the theoretical aspects of visual communication which relates to the meaning making procedure, and thereafter we looked into some of the practical implementations and some of the components of visual communication, how they interact with each other. So today our entire discussion would revolve around mostly on some of the application and implementational aspects of visual semiotics and visual communication. Though this is a lecture series, ideally this supported by practical assignments or hands-on experience would give you a better understanding of visual communication design by using semiotics, but hence since this is a lecture series, I would be giving you some overview of how these mechanisms could be utilized for your better understanding and designing in future. So today's topic, if we look at, so we will look at the applications and implementations. So how to apply image text in visual communication. So we have learned that there are two components of visual communication. That way it is pretty simple, but just this two component makes it also complex, and this is one of the most subjective domain ever possible, which is which is researched on and interpreted. But thankfully we have these subjects in place, we have these disciplines in place where we now can look into this particular area or domain in a scientific manner, and hence can create or apply or implement many of these things which lead to better communicational device. So now the question comes that, having said we have image and text together, last day we saw some of the relationship between image and text and how are they what kind of implication they have in terms of relationship. Now the question comes that image and text, how do we apply them, or what is the what each relationship has in common. So there are two things which are there in common. There are two types of relationship between image and text which we heavily bank on when it comes to visual communication design. One is the status relation. So one is the status relation between the image and text, whether the status is equal or unequal. So that's the first logical understanding might come into your mind when it comes to putting an image and text together. Do they have equal status in your visual field? That is one. But the second one, more importantly, is called a logico-semantic relationship, where we not only look into the status, it is not about whether one is there or the other is not there, but what we look into is here what is depicted in the image and what is referred to by the text. So in a status we look at relative status between text and image, whereas in logico-semantic relation we compare what is depicted and is what is referred in the text. So here comes a question of seeing and perceiving. What is depicted in an image is something which will have your own mental model and your own conceptual model to work with. So what is depicted in the image has its own construct, whereas the text will have something which is referred to it, and then you see, you analyze, you compare what is depicted and what is referred, what is there in the image and what is there in the text, and this contrast or this analysis leads to a whole logico-semantic framework which leads us to applying this in a better fashion. So, let us first look at the first step of status relationship over here. So, status relationship, as I mentioned, could be equal or unequal, and equal is the image and text are dependent. So, the first could be the image and text are dependent and the image and text are complementary. So, equality is achieved if they are independent. So, if the image and the text, so if this is the image and text do not have any relationship, they are independent of each other, there exists an equality amongst each other. So, there is no relationship between them and hence they gain an equal status. Another way of looking at it is when they have complementarity, means they have a complete dependency amongst each other. So, when the image and text complements each other. So, if this is an image and this is the text, this complements the image and this complements the text, there is a dependency, but there is a sense of complementing each other, then we achieve equality. Whereas, inequality, unequal status is achieved when the image subordinate text or vice versa, the text subordinates the image. So, first of all, this status relationship you can utilize in your day to day practice in design, where you can play with this image and text whether you want to keep them separate. You are bringing in equality amongst them, or you want them to complement each other, or many a times the image subordinates the text or the text subordinates the image. So, this is the status wise relationship that you can use between image and text when it comes to designing. Now, let us come to the next one which we were talking about, is the logico-semantic approach of image and text. Let us have a look over here. So, logico-semantic relation or that approach can be done by three possible manner. One is expansion. We have already talked about expansion in our last lecture. So, you have image and text. So, one expands into another. So, one gives way to the other. One is there and then you are expanding the text as a part of this. So, there is an expansion which is taking place. The second one is the projection. The projection of image and text happens in a way that it is the projected aspect, it is the thought, it is the idea, it is not the real expansion which is happening. Say for example, if I tell you this term that Ram said he won't come, or Ram said he is late. So, what is happening? Ram said is a part in itself, but what he said he is late for the class, for example. So, this part is the projected part, which could be a text or image or whatever, but it is a projection, right. So, this is a fairly independent way of connection between the two, but this is also another way of connecting where Ram said and then it could be anything, right. So, it is a projected aspect what is being talked about. So, it could be thought or it could be the speech which we are talking about. And the third one is the decoration, where decoration perhaps has no connection, no semantic connection between each other. It's what you say, it's a building up individually. So, diagrammatically if you look at over here, it's the expansion that takes place and this is the projection which happens, and decoration is an expansion inward or expansion within, but there is no apparent connection between them. Now, we will have a look at all of three in separation, all of three, and then we will go to the further subdivisions of what expansion does, what projection does, and what decoration does. So, if we look at expansion, as we discussed in our last lecture, it happens through three possible manner: elaboration, extension, and enhancement. So, these are three possible manners in which it happens, and if we further break down elaboration, we will see that many a times they are referred to in different ways. One is explanation. So, when you are giving an explanation, say for example, in other words, you are saying elaborating something in other words what is happening, or you are exemplifying that, for example something else, or you are talking about specification. Some of the things we have already discussed in our last class. Say for example, to be precise, what is that? So, and the fourth one could be identification. You are trying to identify namely what are the things. So, this is the way the elaboration works. Enhancement is nothing but a collection of different aspects, variation, depict sequence, alteration, etc. So, extension works on this particular model, whereas enhancement we talked about time, space, spatio-temporal, those kind of aspects where it is the circumstances and situations. So, this is what is depicted over here. Projection, as we talked about, works on two mechanism. One is the by word or speech, so what you are trying to talk about, and the other word is the idea or thought. So, this is the whole framework, and decoration is where you are subjugating, where you are enhancing without any apparent implication on the meaning. It is just adding on, it is just an add-on which really does not impact the meaning or overall understanding of the message. So, these are few ways in which the logico-semantic relation works, and this we can utilize in our day-to-day design, whether we want to do an expansion, whether we want to show a projection, or whether we want to do a decoration. So, as we have discussed when we were discussing about the history of visual communication, till quite a certain point of time, which was not very far, till First World War, visual communication design or visual design was completely synonymous with decorative aspects of text and image. So, if you have an image and if you have a text, people will just start put flower and leaves all around and start to decorate that. Now, this does not have any influence, any specific influence on the meaning making aspect of that particular text or image, but it is an add-on which kept on happening. So, this gives an understanding of the logico-semantic relation. Now, let us go forward. You can have a look at this particular slide in your study material for further reading. Now, if we take an example over here, okay, so if you look at this image and text connection, you have an image of a skull, which the image represents death or danger for that matter, and then you have the text which says kills by biting prey with jagged teeth. So, there is a process which is killing, it is talking about killing, and the manner is by biting with jagged teeth and things like that. Now, here you can see that there is no apparent connection between these two images, like this is related to death and this is related to killing, but it is not talking about, this particular image is not talking about anything in this particular text. Apart from that, it is a more generic formation of the text. So, here this is a case of exemplification, and hence it is an elaboration which is happening over here. Whereas, if you look at in this particular image, there is a fork and there is a knife, and then you say fish and small prey. So, here the image represents eating, something to do with eating, whereas the text is talking about fish and small prey. Now, here the image and text make own unrelated contribution. So, if you look at the second image, in the first image and text there was still some kind of connection, there was death, and there was an exemplification of the death or an explanation of the death perhaps is by killing by jagged teeth, or biting by jagged teeth and things like that. So, hence the image and the text is connected by elaborative terms. So, they have a connection based on elaboration. So, this is something, the way why this example is shown is when you are doing your visual design, when you are having different applications in visual communication design, keep this in mind, that whether you want an elaboration and based on what are you trying to, the text is an exemplification of the image, or the image is an explanation of what is happening in the text. So, based on this you design or you craft your visual communication design. Now, coming to the second image which we are talking about, you have the image of a fork and knife which has something to do with eating, and you are talking about fish and small prey. Now, each of these components, if you see the visual message elements and the textual element, each of them together are making their own contribution of meaning, and then bringing them together perhaps is an extension. There could be some form of extension which is playing into picture over here, where it is talking about a form of eating. So, that is why this fits in under the extension part of it. So, here the process is eating and the goal is fish and small prey. So, maybe it is referring to certain kind of eating where the target is fish and small prey, but when it comes to the visual message together, each are having their own contributions. So, it is just a manner, perhaps it is just a circumstance where eating is related to fish and small prey for some kind of animal, say for example a bird or say frog or something like that, where this makes sense, and this is just a situation, this is just an extension of circumstances, and hence it is put under the domain of extension. So, this is how it works in the world of image and text when we talk about that together. Now, let us have a look at the next part, where we are looking at the application and designing degree of relation. So, there is a degree of relationship also. So, we have talked about different relationship, but there is a degree of relationship also associated when we talk about relationship. So, decide relevant association between text and image and hence design. So, this is the first step that you should look at, and then this association is to be analyzed based on logico-semantic and status relationship of the image and text of the particular purpose. So, this we have already discussed how you should take the approach of designing, and now let us look at the degree of relationship with the text, and that has a varying capacity that leads to a whole new domain of different attributes related with image and text. So, first one we will see the level of relation. So, the first one will be little relation to the text. So, there could be little relation to text. The second one could be close relation to text, and the third one would be beyond text. So, there is something beyond the text. So, these are three possible degrees which are possible, and if we look at little relation to text, which are the situations where you have little relation to text. So, the first point which we discussed is when it comes to when you are decorating, there is a little relation to text when you are eliciting some kind of emotion. There is a little or less relation to the text, and then you have some kind of control. You are trying to have a control with the image, and then you use this kind of thing. So, now coming to decorate, if we look at what are the possible ways of decorating, you change, you match this style. So, there is a case of stylization which we talked about, or you change pace. So, here we use decorations. So, what happens in these kind of cases is you are trying to make the text more attractive without having any value to the meaning making process, which I have just discussed, where you are adding on to the text without having any real value. So, what you are doing is you are changing the pace, perhaps you are which used to look very dull or unattractive, you are making it more attractive and stylized, or in other case you are trying to match it with some other existing style. Maybe you are trying to match it with the style of the image, or when the image and text is together, you are trying to pace it up one with the another, so that there is no visual or aesthetic mismatch as such. So, this is where the decoration is taking place, but as you can see in this particular case, the relationship with the text is less, it is feeble. Okay. So, that is how is one part when it comes to the decorative aspect. Now, if we look at the emotional aspect, when we are talking about eliciting emotion, we can have a poetic nature in place, or we can have something which alienates us. So, we can have a poetic notion and we can have something which alienates. So, basically the poetic aspect is the the spiritual qualities or the different effects that the object projects. So, there you talk about, you glorify that, there is a profaneness in that, and that is being glorified. So, you have an emotional connectivity over there, and of course, the image takes a stronger foothold over there and the text recedes back. So, when there is this kind of connection, there is lesser connection with the text and the little relationship with the text. Now, let us come to the control aspect. What happens when it comes to control? When you are trying to control through image and text relation, either you will try to motivate. In case of motivation, you encourage some response. So, you are encouraging some response from viewer, or the other case is where you are trying to engage. So, where you are trying to engage the viewer. So, in case of motivation or engaging by image and text, you will find that there is little connection with text. You do not go by a verbal mechanism to do that, but you go by a viewing and then taking action. There is a sense of motivation where you are seeking a response. So, all of these are possible when there is a lesser connection with the text or a lesser degree of relation with the text. Now, let us look at the next part where when we were talking about close relation. So, this was little relation to text. Now, let us look at the close relation to text. How does it work? And there are various subdivisions for this. So, I will go back to the slide. You can have a look at the subdivision at the slide. So, the close relation to text, there we look at reiteration, we look at organization. When you are trying to organize, when you are trying to reiterate, when you are trying to relate, when you are trying to condense the topics, and when you are trying to explain something. So, in all of these cases, you have a very strong relation with the text, And there are further subdivision. What is reiterating? When you are trying to concretize, when you are trying to humanize, where you are giving a common reference, where you are trying to describe, there is a graph which is transforming information, there is exemplification, you are translating between different things, you are trying to exemplify. So, these are all examples of reiterating. There is a text and image, but you are again reiterating some that with some mechanism. Here it is a very, very close knit connection with the text. Let us look at when you are trying to organize things. So, organization wise, it could be isolated, it could be contained. You are trying to show what is being contained, you are trying to locate something, you are trying to induce some perspective. So, in these kind of situations, it is the organization that plays a major role, and then it is a relationship. It compares, contrasts, there is a parallel relationship, things like that. Then you condense, you concretize things, you make things compact. There you are condensing and explaining, you are defining something, or you are complementing something. So, this you can have a closer look at ease later, but these mechanisms, when you are trying to do all of these things through your visual communication or any one of these things, you are bound to have a very strong relationship with your text. And what does that imply? It implies, if you go back to your Royce's model, it will imply that there has to be a close conjunctive multimodal connection between these elements, the participants, process, mannerism. There should be a close correlation, otherwise there will be a mismatch of visual communication. Now, let us come to the next level, which is beyond the text. When you are talking about the things which go beyond text are when you are trying to interpret, you are trying to interpret something, you are trying to develop something, and you are trying to transform something. So, in these kind of cases, it goes beyond the limits of text, and you do not really rely on text anymore. So, when it comes to interpretation, you emphasize certain things and you document certain aspects. So, this is more factual information that you are trying to project. So, this is where you are going for an interpretation mode, where you are trying to emphasize certain things in your imagery, image text combination, or you are trying to document certain factual aspects. There comes the interpretation part of going beyond the text. Then you develop. When you are developing, you either compare. So, how do you develop something? You compare that, and then you contrast one against another, and that shapes up the next step. So, that is how you develop. And when it comes to transformation, what you do is either you can go by an alternate progress. So, alternate progress, what it means is the image and the text are taking turns. So, you have image, you have text, again you have image, then again you have text. So, they are taking turn one after the other, they are taking turn for expanding the narrative. So, this is the alternate progress and transformation which is taking place. There could be a sense of model. You are modeling something, you are transforming something. Many of the illustrations are examples of model, where you are trying to depict a physical process, or you are trying to develop a cognitive process. Many of the science and engineering drawings, illustrations are cases of physical and cognitive modeling, where you are transforming image for a text. So, these kind of combinations takes place. Illustrations for engineering, say for example, you have a gear system and you are talking about various aspects of it. Now, here you are taking a physical model, you are taking physical aspect, you are making a model out of it, and you are trying to project it. Now, this is beyond text. There is no text trying to explain what is happening here or a one-to-one correlation, but the image will speak for its own, and you are transforming some amount of information, some amount of there is a transformation which is taking place and where it goes beyond the text. Now, coming back to the last one, which is the case of inspiring, or where you inspire, where in case of inspire what is happening is you are encouraging exploration of the viewer. So, this is a very, very crucial aspect where your transformation takes place and you are encouraging exploration in new areas. So, you are opening up the horizon for your viewer to explore newer areas, and this is how you are trying to inspire them. So, this leads to an entire understanding of different degrees of connection between image and text, and where you can utilize many of them together. Now, let us come to one aspect of application, which is when you have a composition and what are its features. So, composition has three particular features. It has an information value, and information value is nothing but owing to its contents and relative organization on which the information is drawn. So, it could be a centralized organization. So, information value is something which you are getting as a stimuli. In other words, you are looking at an image and you are getting some stimuli. This is the information content that you have got, and that is based on purely the organization of these represented participant or the visual message elements. And what is happening over here? It could be a centered composition, it could be polarized when nothing is there in the center and the arrangement is around the periphery. So, this is polarized, or it could be triptych, where you do not in a centralized composition, but the things which are shifted on the left or right. So, you have a little bit of eccentric look at it. So, all of them together forms the information content, and information content could be primarily of two types. One is centered and polarized, and within a polarized content, within a polarized, so say for example, if we have a look at the graphic over here, in a polarized composition, what is generally we find that in a generic situation, what is given on the left indicates something or relates to something on the right. So, what is there on the left is a given, is something which we already know, or is something which is given, and the one towards the right is the new that takes shape. So, these are the information content of an image when we look at. On the left side is given and on the right side is the new, and hence the most of the vectors work in this fashion. Whereas, if we segregate between top and bottom, the top represents most of the time the ideal situation, and the bottom represents the real. So, these are various connotations associated with the information content. Now, let us come to the second aspect of application when it comes to composition, the degree to, so this is called the salience, and that is the degree to which the element draws attention to itself, owing to its color, size, sharpness, and things like that. Very, very important aspect. First is the information content owing to its placement. You understand, you get some kind of meaning out of it, you start making meaning, and there are set rules for that. So, you always keep this in mind. Whereas, the second part is how do these elements attract attention towards themselves. So, this is the salience, this is salience feature of it, and it happens owing to color. We talked about many aspects when we are talking about composition and principles of composition. So, many of these color, shape, sharpness, variation, contrast, all of it together comes into picture to draw attention. And the last one is the framing. The framing is the degree to which elements are visually connected or disconnected using line, space, or discontinuity. So, framing, all the visual designers heavily bank on framing, but mind it, framing is somewhere between connection and disconnection. So, if you have a frame around, it is connecting between this space and that space, true. It could act as a disconnection between this space and that space too. So, it is up to you how you are designing that, but these are 3 compositional aspects that you should keep in mind when you play with image and text together, and they have their own informational content. Now, let us go to the next aspect, which is the rhetorical structure theory. What it talks about in short is, in contrast to conjunctive relations which we talked about, it is less anchored to step by step interpretation of linguistic units and hence supports multimodality. So, in conjunctive multimodal analysis, we saw that we are going step by step with the linguistic units. So, if we say the boy chased the dog, we are going by the step by step linguistic units and then drawing a comparison and drawing a tie between them. But in rhetoric structure theory, it is taking a different approach. The approach is instead, it is more concerned with intentions, knowledge and beliefs of the interactive participants, and concerns effectiveness of communication instead of analysis of persuasion. So, in other words, what is happening in rhetoric structure theory is that, in contrast to Royce's model, here we are not playing too much emphasis on the represented participants, on the things, on the small units which are being either shown or talked about. Here instead, the emphasis is more on the about the interactive participants, that is the communicator and the receiver, and their intention, knowledge and the message content, which is the message intent, is playing a major role over here. So, that is the entire domain of rhetoric structure theory, which in short. And if you see the rhetoric, the multimodal rhetoric structure theory, there are 2 things which plays over here. One is the nucleus. It will always have a nucleus and it will have some satellites. So, this is the model by which the rhetoric structure theory works. So, nucleus is the part which is more important and dominant, and it will convey the primary message. So, this is the primary message that you will get in RST, whereas the satellite is lesser important, and but it will provide some secondary message that will work towards this nucleus. So, that is what it happens when it comes to this kind of model. So, let us take one example. Open the door, you must grasp the handle firmly. So, this is a linguistic example we are looking at, and when you say open the door, okay, this in itself is the nucleus. It is not reliant on any other form. This is the primary message, open the door, and then you are having a satellite which is grasp the handle firmly or things like that. So, if we take off one with the other, if we say open the door, it is still conveying the primary message, but if we take off the nucleus, grasp the handle properly, it does not convey the primary message of opening the door, and together they might be conveying an important message. Say for example, this is an instruction during earthquake or some kind of emergency situation. If you do not have the connection between the nucleus and the satellite, it is lost. So, rhetoric structure theory works on this principle of looking into the nucleus and looking into the satellite, which is a very, very strong point for communication, and you should always design your nucleus and satellite henceforth and design accordingly. So, both are connected by sequentiality and assumption. So, in other words, what it means is rhetoric structure theory is dependent on sequentiality assumption. So, there is a sense of sequentiality and assumption, certain kind of assumption comes into picture, as you can see in the example, that there is a sequence of open the door, and for that you are asking some kind of action or satellite is subjugating that. If this is not happening, if there is a random juxtaposition, there will be a tension which is created in your imagery. Many of the visual artists often do that. So, juxtaposition without having these nucleus or satellite in a particular sequential arrangement will create some kind of tension within your image. So, that has been, and also bears the character of intention between the interactive participants. So, that we try to understand that RST is about the intentions of the interactive participants or the communicator and the receiver. Here we get a sense of that by the nucleus and satellite identification. We can get the nature of the intent. So, we can understand that this is an instruction, this is a firm instruction for something. It is going from the communicator to the receiver for a situation in an emergency. It is asking grasp the handle properly, but one without the other will not make sense. So, this is in short what rhetoric structure theory does. Let us look at the example, visual example over here if we have. So, both of these two graphic has the intention, which has the intention of break the window. But if you look at the graphic now, they have two different imagery breaking the window in two particular fashion. So, you can definitely figure out the intent now. So, you can see the nucleus is break the window definitely, but the satellite also hints to a very, so the nucleus and satellite together is conveying a very important notion, very important information about the nature of conveyance between the communicator and the receiver. That brings us to the end of this particular course. We have talked about various aspects of visual communication design in terms of semiotics, and all of them knit together when you now start designing your next assignment or your next project. Keep all of the points that we discussed in mind, and I am sure that your visual design would be a much better enhanced design, which suffices three things which we talked about. It will be a more effective mode of communication, it will be more efficient, and it will be more engaging for your viewers. So, hope you have enjoyed the entire course and wish you all the best for your future. Thank you.